I'm talking now to Colm Gildernew, MLA. Colm, thanks very much for talking to us. Very good of you to give us of your busy time. What I'd like to talk to you about very briefly is the changes, the planned changes in the electoral map. Now, a couple of years ago, I was in touch with you, I think, and at that stage, the Electoral Commission, I think, had put forward a revised version of the electoral map, which they saw as being fairer division of boundaries. The DUP responded to this, rejected it and put forward a very different model of change. And the Electoral Commission then produced a second document which almost exactly matched the DUP one. Have I got that right?
That, in essence, that's correct, yeah. The Boundary Commission carried out a full review in 2016, the purpose of which was to reduce, in terms of the Westminster had asked for a reduction in seats from 650 down to 600. The impact of that here in the north was that they were looking for a reduction from 18 seats to 17. So the Boundary Commission set about a piece of work to achieve that. They produced a set of recommendations and proposals, and those broadly appeared to have been reasonably well considered, appeared to be reasonably fair, and for once, and crucially here in the north, had not had to resort to the use of Rule 7, which is actually known colloquially as the gerrymander rule, because it allowed boundary commissions here to go outside of the parameters of what was being said in Westminster. So their set of proposals came back, and they had reduced the number of seats, remained within the boundaries. They had looked in detail at Belfast, and they had decided that the best way to proceed in terms of Belfast was reduced down from 4 to 3 seats in Belfast. They produced a complete set of rationale for those proposals, and those were broadly welcomed by most people here. Okay. However, the DUP did not receive them quite so well, and in fact, the DUP's Ian Paisley was reported to have said, "We'll see about that."
Why did he object to it? What was his main concern?
Well, I don't know if he ever elaborated on what his concerns were, nor if that was ever got to the bottom of it, but it clearly didn't suit that Unionist Party's particular perspective on how things should be delineated here. And I think the Ulster Unionist Party would have provided proposals as well. But the DUP were so exercised that they produced their own set of proposals that they thought would look like a shape of an electoral map that would be to their liking.
And am I right in saying that their version that they produced was then reproduced almost exactly by the Electoral Commission or the Boundaries Commission?
Yeah, the Boundary Commission then carried out a further review and came back with a new set of proposals. In the new set of proposals, they had reverted to a 4-seat Belfast. They had returned Fermanagh and South Tyrone back to very close to its original shape that it had been coming into the two reviews. And it did indeed, in fact, if you put the two together, and in fact, the two were put together on graphics and were published at the time, the two looked uncannily similar, I have to say. So it was, and it has to be said at that time, the Boundary Commission produced absolutely no rationale as to why they essentially overthrew their original proposals.
So that was a couple of years ago. What's the present state of play? Has there been any further development? And is there any? This map is for Westminster elections. Is that correct?
Yes, it's for Westminster elections.
Yeah.
And it's notable. It's notable that in the second iteration of the Boundary Commission's proposals, the ones which looked very like the ones the DUP had suggested, they had reverted to the use of Rule 7, and they had to apply it 5 times here in the north. So
just explain that Rule 7 a wee bit more, if you would, Colm.
So Rule 7 was a kind of a special derogation for the north, whereby Boundary Commission in the north was allowed to vary the figures for a constituency, the overall electorate within a constituency, by plus or minus 5%.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, that's 10% of latitude, quite wide latitude. Didn't apply anywhere else across in Britain, and that's why it became known as the gerrymander rule, because it applied solely here in the north. So the Boundary Commission not only reset their revised proposals to very similar to the DUP, but in doing so had to revert to Rule 7 5 times.
So have things progressed at all? I mean, I saw those maps, or you showed me those maps back a couple of years ago. Have they made any progress, and when will these be implemented, or will this latest map be implemented?
Well, that's actually now very uncertain. There was a court case taken, a judicial review into the revised proposals was taken in 2019. And that, well, it might have been 2018 actually, those proceedings started, but around that time there was a judicial review taken. The court in Belfast found that the Boundary Commission had been incorrect to revise their proposals, and that they hadn't provided any evidence as to why that was done. Now, they didn't at that point quash, but they instead were waiting to come back to a further hearing to state what the remedy would be for that. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, the proposal for the entire review has been withdrawn at Westminster, as a result of which this now sits kind of in no man's land. It's still the subject of court proceedings. It's been withdrawn in Westminster, and in fact, the bill in Westminster indicates that Westminster are now going to revert back to the 650 seat model.
So has there been a lot of noise and bluster signifying nothing in the end?
Yeah, and it's all quite confusing, and it has to be said there are outstanding questions, and it's hard to know how we will get the answer to those questions. But we believe that the court case should be followed through to its conclusion, because there still has been no explanation why the Boundary Commission totally changed. And bear in mind, they had received thousands of objections to their revised proposals, yet in all, they have never given any rationale as to why they changed from what appeared a very measured and quite a skillful piece of work in the first instance, and then they reverted to this other model.
Answer me this question, if you would, Colm. Who is on the Boundary Commission and who appoints them?
The Boundary Commission is a strange kind of it's appointed by the Speaker in Westminster. There isn't a great deal of transparency around it, or around how that appointments process is put in place. And we would have issues around the whole democratic accountability of that process. But it's kind of shrouded in mystery from start to finish, as indeed has this review itself.
Do we know who's on it?
I do remember hearing one time who the chair of it was, but I don't recall now who that was. But I don't know who the other members were, and I think it's quite difficult to find out. Our energies at the time were sort of going into trying to, and I have to say, since I came into public politics, I have never seen an issue that energized and angered people so much, because they recall the impact of gerrymander here in these constituencies, and people, and it was seen very much as an attempt by unionists in any case to move the goalposts. Now that the numbers here were coming into quite a delicate balance in terms of previous majority rule and indeed majority misrule, as we all experienced. So it was something that gained a huge amount of public interest, and the public responded in their thousands.
So you're saying Westminster, have they given up on this idea of reducing the number of MPs, and therefore really it's not going to be an issue in the end?
Well, that appears to be the case. They are bringing forward a bill to bring forward a new Boundary Commission and to revert back to the 650 seats, which potentially and likely will mean that it will remain 18 seats here. Not certain, of course, but that would be the perceived wisdom, I suppose.
Right. Very good. That clarifies a lot of things. Well, it sounds like a happy ending for the wrong reasons, maybe, in that Westminster have given up on their efforts.
Yeah, and it is unsatisfactory in that we still have never got to the answer as to why those were changed. So I think in some senses there remains more questions than answers clearly in this one. But it's something that I think is of huge interest in terms of the democratic process here, and that the electoral rules and the boundaries properly reflect the reality on the ground, and that's hugely important going forward.
You said it was going to be, just a last question, Colm. You said it was going to be reduced from 18 to 17 MPs.
Yeah.
Was Sinn Féin able to establish what change would have been affected if the DUP and then the Boundary Commission's latest map, if that had been implemented? What effect would that have had in terms of numbers for Unionists elected and Nationalists/Republicans elected, do you think?
I don't recall the detail of exactly, but I think it would have had an impact in that there would have been less Unionist representation, and that's
on the less representation on the original. If they followed the original map.
On the original map, yes, yeah.
And with the map that they then come up with after the DUP wrote theirs or drew theirs, what would have been the?
Well, it would have stabilised to a degree the status quo as it was in terms of the Unionist versus Nationalist Republican, but it also had a significant impact. Had it been brought forward, it would have had a significant impact on the assembly boundaries and would have left a fair number of assembly constituencies potentially without any nationalist representation at all. So really? It was a double whammy. It was a double whammy in that sense. Not so it was Westminster representation.
Yeah, it was for Westminster and for Stormont then.
Yeah, and for Stormont. And this, of course, was at a time where you were seeing where unionism had lost its majority in Stormont, Belfast City Council, and these are a result of demographic factors, which should be fairly reflected in how the elections are constructed.
So, are you expecting? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that is our demand on this all along has been that it should be fair. It should reflect the reality on the ground and the makeup of the constituencies, and that they shouldn't be used in a way to gain political advantage. So
it looks at the moment, would you be reasonably confident that there won't be any further pushing to have a reduction and then to follow the DUP map?
Well, you don't know. You don't know with these things. On the face of it, if they're remaining the same, you would expect that the boundaries that the constituencies here would remain the same. So I would never take anything for granted in terms of a Westminster Boundary Commission. They're shrouded in so much opacity that it's just hard to know and to weave your way through them. And that in itself is a problem. We believe there should be greater transparency in that respect.
So suppose the message is be alert. Stay alert. Stay alert.
And otherwise stay at home, but stay alert when it comes to Boundary Commission.
Thanks very much, Colm. Excellent talking to you.
Okay,
Look after yourself now. All the best.
All right.